Good morning. So I have two questions that I would like to ask. The first one is kind of similar to what the gentleman just asked. I find myself when I'm trying to meditate or have a lot of thought in my head that I can actually feel the vibration of my source like take over my body.
Good.
Not like a shivering, but like I can physically feel the vibration like just taking over.
What you're feeling is, you're right, it is a bit what he was describing. It's your asking is strong in the midst of some resistance, because as you just said, you're having a little bit of difficulty quieting your mind, and so your desire is strong enough that you're summoning source through some resistance, and that's what that little shimmering is about. You're making the connection, but it could be easier for you if you could relax a little more. On the one hand, doesn't it feel good that you can feel your inner being there? Yes, that's what we said about humans. You like the drama of things. But you could, what Esther did in the beginning as she was having those experiences, she would offer one soft word, willing, I'm willing. And then she would just breathe with the intention of letting every bit of resistance leave her so that that energy could smooth out and feel. When they're on the ships, the big ships that have these stabilizers, they don't notice the ocean much at all. It has to be pretty rough before you feel it on these big ships. But when they are coming into port or leaving port, they turn on some side thrusters. And those side thrusters go, and you can really feel it no matter where you are on the ship for just a little while the ship is leaving. It's Esther's favorite time. She just loves that feeling. She wishes the ship would do that all night long. She really likes that. It's sort of like that the thrusters are causing some resistance, and your little bit of resistance is evidenced by that sensation.
I was trying to like control it or like figure out how to maybe manipulate it, but you're saying just release.
The thing about meditation is this is a time when you're not wanting to manipulate anything. You've already done all of your asking, and step 2 is happening. Source is flowing to you. So your intention during meditation is to be in a state of step 3, which is in a state of non-thought. We're talking a lot about that these days because the vibration of a question and the vibration of an answer are two different vibrations. So if you go into meditation with a strong interest in solving a problem or getting an answer, you're holding yourself in a vibration that is not in harmony with the answer, and that causes that sort of feeling. Where if you can let go of the question because you've already asked it, then the answer can come in a resistance-free way. So the way we've been describing it is you sit for 20 minutes if you can. Longer isn't really helpful. And you focus on something boring like the hum of the air conditioner or something. It only takes 68 seconds of doing that before you are in a state of non-resistance. It might take a minute or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 to get there, but once you get into that place of a quieted mind, it happens fast. So your mind is quieted because you're focusing on something boring, and you are focusing on something boring. You're not allowing your mind to wander into the questions and problems of your life. You are focusing on something boring. You don't think, I've heard better. You don't judge it or question it. You just quiet your mind. So as you do, your vibration is allowed by you to rise. So now that's when you're starting to feel that little buffering because you're letting more of that vibration in. And as you continue to focus so that the resistance stops, now you're just in that place. It's a bit like, have you seen the movies where the man is in the spaceship and he's breaking through the atmosphere, and right before he breaks through, it looks very intense for him, and then once he breaks out into the gravity-free atmosphere, it's like, well, that's sort of what it's like. You can feel this resistance-free. And once you're there, now, things that are in your vortex that you've been asking for will begin to occur to you because you are allowing it. It isn't that someone is promoting these thoughts. They've always been being promoted, and they've always been being projected. They've always been being revealed to you. But now you, in your absence, in your utter, complete absence of resistance, are realizing them. And so they're being translated by you at an unconscious level, just like what's happening here with Esther, into ideas and thoughts about whatever is the most resistance-free subject that you are allowing. Often it's not even on the subject of the things you think are important, but it is on the subject of things that you have easy allowance about. Does that make sense to you? The way Esther describes it as she's doing her segment intending before she sits to meditate, she writes, I adore the feeling of detachment. She doesn't write the same thing every time, but things like this. I really like that feeling of letting go. I adore the feeling of well-being that sort of surrounds me. And then she writes, and once that happens, I really like watching the movie, if there is one. And what she means by that is she knows that she's just readying herself for reception. And it might be there and it might not, but she doesn't have a dog in the fight. She's not saying, I'm going to meditate and I'm going to get into a place and I'm going to receive a book today. Or I'm going to get in a place and I'm going to solve the problems of the world. She's not doing that because that projection of what she wants to fix will block her from the energy that is necessary in order to allow it to be fixed. Can you feel the difference?
Yeah.
So quiet your mind, allow your vibration to rise, and then just enjoy what happens so that it's blissful and pleasant. This is the orientation that we're wanting to assist all of you with. Humans, we love you so much, but you've trained yourself through flawed premises and through some coercion and control of other humans around you too. You've trained yourself to believe that it's effort and striving and hard work that makes things happen. And we're not saying that someone who tries to do something won't get more done than someone who's not trying at all. We like Esther's word "ordinary" about it. And what we are saying is that the true power is in this non-physical energy, and it's already underway for you. So you want to now be in that step 3 state where you're allowing yourself the receiving of it. And so once you meditate on purpose and you find that feeling of detachment, which will come so easily for you, and then pleasant thoughts are flowing across your mind so that there's no question that you are in the state of allowing, although don't think too much about it because you don't want to get your thoughts involved in it. Then, as you feel an impulse or feel an inclination as you're coming out of meditation to do something, and you follow through with it, and something clear happens about it, then you know you were there. So it's not just listening to someone who seems like they're excited about what they're talking about. It's not just another opinion. You've shown yourself that you have tapped into this energy that creates worlds, and that you're being guided from that framework in the direction of things that matter to you. We want to find a way to explain to you that what you're asking for has already been accomplished. Now you're just putting yourself in a place where you can receive the impulse to move in the direction of it. But sometimes humans feel like you've got to do something definitive and you've got to get the credit for it, and it's not like that. You've asked and it's been given, and now you've got a choice of letting it in or not letting it in. But the harder you try, the less likely you are to let it in. And the easier you are about it, the more likely you are to let it in, which seems counterintuitive to the way you've been trained in your humandom, with the emphasis on dumb.
Part 2, which is feeds off of part 1, is I have a hard time.
Stop for just a moment. We do want to hear your question completely. But think about segment intending. And think about Esther sitting and reaching for feeling words. She would never sit and say, I'm having a hard time. Because that's practicing a vibration of resistance. And you can't get to where you're going from there. So let's do a segment intending before you ask this next question. This is the way Esther would approach it if she were sitting there. She would write, I really like the idea of visiting with infinite intelligence. And I like the feeling of clarity that often comes under these conditions. I'm happy about what I've already come to know. I'm pleased that I get this law of attraction thing. I feel happy that I know how this works, and I'm eager about understanding it more fully. Didn't that feel good? Didn't those words feel good as you wrote them? Doesn't it feel good just to acknowledge this moment? Didn't this moment just improve by focusing it in that way? So now you're in that place where your question will be the perfect question for you to understand what you're reaching for. So now you're there. What?
The ability to not overanalyze and have like 10 movies playing in my head at once. I'm a professional dancer, so it helps me when it comes to creating new dances and creating, movement. But when it comes to, for example, a relationship that it's more of a friendship, but we're intimate and romantic, but the person feels like they need some type of separation so they can focus on business. And then on my end, I'm trying to figure out, like, I know it's not my fault, and I know they need their space, and so they can create their reality.
We're saying this to you, and we're also saying it to everyone who's listening in. The segment intending that we didn't get out far enough ahead of all the things that you're worrying about relative to all of that. You introduced a whole bunch of difficult things that you're wanting to solve, several things. So let's back up and get out ahead of it again. In this segment, this is you writing. I like knowing that I understand the difference between step 1 and step 3. You do, don't you? Yes. I like knowing that step 1 is the question and step 3 is the answer. And that step 2 is what Abraham's going to do right now. And I like knowing that I'm going to be in a step 3 moment here. I like knowing that now Abraham knows what it is I want to talk about, and I'm in a state of expecting to understand. I like the feeling of anticipation that I'm going to understand what comes next, sort of getting out ahead of it. We're trying to accomplish 2 things here. Wanting to answer your question, we're wanting to demonstrate what state of being he has to be in for our answer to make any sense. We have the best answer that you can ever imagine that you can't hear, because your question is so active within you, and your justification for your question is so active within you. So you're like the woman at the airport spewing this hurricane of question, and you can't let the answer through under those conditions. So you got to find some way of knowing that you've spewed it, and knowing that you've asked it, and knowing that the relationship, especially the one that's on your mind, has put so many things that you're asking for in the vortex, and that your inner being and law of attraction has gathered up the cooperative components, and that the path will be easy for you to hear. You just have to get yourself in a place where you expect to be able to hear that. So we want to point out something to you. This prepaving and your alignment was sufficient enough that you received an impulse, you received a block of thought that you expressed to us here that was the perfect jumping off place for the answer of this question. You said, I am a dancer, and you're the creator of the dances. Yes, you're also the dancer of the dances. And you know what it feels like for those things to evolve. So you know that feeling of having a pretty good idea of what you're going to do, and then as you go to do it, it evolves even beyond what you planned into something even better than what you planned. Because in the moment, there are other cooperative components that come in. Your partners, the other partners. Under those conditions, you sometimes hear something in the music that you didn't hear before. You know what it's like. You know, in that very example that you gave, the difference between planning to do something, which is creating the dance, and actually dancing the dance, and you know the difference. You know that sometimes you're in a much more receptive mode when you get under the influence of the music, and more comes through you than you planned. Those dances always turn out way better than you planned. Way better. And don't you also acknowledge, as you're writing this segment, going to the next and the next, don't you love that feeling of it happening in the moment? Don't you love being conscious and aware of when that magical thing happens, where the new idea came and you executed it in that moment? Don't you love that leading edge creation that you are on? And isn't it helpful to know that the same way that it happens in dance, it happens in relationships, it happens in business? That's the process. So as you identify and isolate and calibrate that emotional differences in the way you feel when you are clinically defining the dance and when you are emotionally dancing the dance.